Okay. All right, let's get started. All right, so if first just make sure everyone should be at 3 movie data starter. So if you're not on there, please check out that branch and get on the starter code. So let's see. All right, so if we go to movie table view controller, right, so if we go to movie table view controller, which is where we left off last time, you see like all these functions that have already been essentially defined for you. And so you're like, why is that? And well, that's essentially also because of like the subclassing that goes on. So once again, so the generic overarching class, I guess, is a UI table view controller, and we're just making like a specific type of it that we want to call a movie table view controller, which is why like we override like certain functions that essentially like need to be like overridden every single time you want to like make a new UI table view controller. And so let's take a look at some of these functions. So view did load, as you will recall, is familiar because view did load is needs to be overridden in every essential like basically UI view controller class there is. Because it defines, it basically says like what is going to happen on the screen the first time you load this view. So yeah, there's that. And then you sort of have like the more specific versions or more specific functions, right? So like number of sections, I think that should be like self-explanatory, right? Like the number of sections in your table. So I guess like an example of this is if you like open your settings app on your phone, on your iPhone, let's see. Does anyone want to like tell me how many sections there are? Just like scrolling through your phone, just to sort of illustrate like what a section is. I'm catching mine. Anyone in the chat maybe want to like say how many sections you counted in your table view on your phone? 9. So Yunso says 9. Anyone else? You look at my simulator over here. What a section is yeah, essentially like I counted 9 as well, but it's essentially like a collection of like cells that are like right next to each other, versus like the black space that like defines the sections, right? So I guess like on the settings app, that could be like the first is like I guess your Apple ID card, and then the next section is like airplane mode through like personal hotspot, like VPN if you have VPN. And next section would be like notifications, like through screen time. Like this is for like at least like iOS like I don't know, 14 or 13 at least. But like if you just look at my screen over here on the simulator, how many sections are there? Well, there's section A, B, H, T, and Z, right? And so I don't know, like how many is it? It's like 5 sections. So you can like sort of see what the difference between a section and like a cell is. And like each of these sections has like one cell other than like H, which has 2 cells, for example. Does that make sense? Does everyone understand what a section is? Okay. Cool. Sorry. And so here you have the next function is, well, it sort of tells you return the number of rows in each section, right? And you're given so essentially it'll give you like which section you're in, and it'll return the number of rows in that section. And so for example, right, like I only have 1 section, so I'm just returning like 10, right? Because there's only 1 section. Well, let's say like I were to have like 2 sections. Then how would I return? And let's say like each section has like a different like length, right? So does anyone have any ideas like how I would like return uh how to like return the number of cells in each section if each section has like a different number of cells? Anyone have any ideas? Feel free to like unmute yourself or type in the chat. But I'll give it like 10 more seconds or so. Okay. So one way you could do this is you can define a like an array, let's say like let section length be like I don't know, like 5, 2, and like 1, right? And so for number of sections, for example, you could return section length dot count, right? So that will tell you me how many sections are there. There's 3 sections because the array is of length 3. And then for number of rows in section, you could then just be say like section length at section, right? And let's take a look and see what this does. If this loads. So that's still building. So for some reason preview is not updating. But all right. Well, if you run this, you'll see like 3 sections on your preview, each with like different section lengths. So yeah, so that's essentially how you would go about that. So for now, I'm just gonna comment this out. And we'll just say we want to again. Oops. And we just want a single section for our purposes. So you can like start thinking about like if you want to make like a project, you know, perhaps how many sections you would need, etc. All right. So the next function here is going to be pretty important. So it's essentially saying like what cell should I display at a certain row at a certain section on the screen. And well, that can be like really useful because like let's say you have like multiple types of cells you want to display, right? Like for example, like if you look at like the news app, so I love going to the news app because it's one of like it's just got a lot of everything. If you open the news app, right, like the first thing you'll see is like a top story. So a news app isn't really like a table view, it's something called a collection view. But like still like they have multiple types of cells, right? So like the first cell you see, right, is like takes up like a very large chunk of the screen, right? And it's just like one article. But like right underneath that, you'll see like 2 half articles, or 2 articles, sorry, that like column like right next to each other. So there's like 2 articles per row, right? And so that's another type of cell, right? Like how to that's different from like the first cell you see. And then even below that, you see like another cell that takes up like one entire row, but has the picture on the right, right, and like text on the left. So those are like 3 different types of cells right there. And how do you display like all 3 types of cells on one view, right? So that's where this function comes into play here, right? So basically it's saying like if I'm at like a certain row, certain section, I wanted to key like this specific type of cell. And so that is what line 38 is doing. So dequeue reusable cell with identifier, like the cell ID, right? The specific cell ID for like that index path, where index path is essentially index path is, you can think of it sort of as like dictionary of like row and like section. Um, so yeah, you can, that's what you can think of index path as. And then inside here, you can like configure the cell, which we'll be looking at later, which is basically like saying like, you know, maybe like if you're on the news app, you know, you got like images for each cell, you want to like load those images. So you can like say like cell.load image or like cell.like set text, right, is what we're doing here. And then you return the cell. And so you may be wondering, right, like why do like, you know, like why do we have this function, or like why do we need to like dequeue a reusable cell? Does anyone have like any ideas as to like why we can't just load all the cells at once? No idea. All right. Um, right. Yeah. So it's just really like a performance question, right? Like imagine like you have like a library app and you have like hundreds of thousands, like millions of like books like inside this app. Do you want to like load like millions of cells at once? No, right? Like that's just gonna make your phone slow. It's gonna make performance really slow. And that's why we use a dequeue reusable cell. And that's why this essentially, this function is only called when you scroll down to the cell that is being displayed on the page. So you're basically only going to be loading like what is currently displayed on the page or what is about to be displayed on the page. So that means you'd only load like, I don't know, like maybe like 10 cells at a time or something. Maybe like a little bit more than that, right? If your cells are small, rather than like, you know, millions of cells at once, right? No one wants like a, a slow app, right? Then you wouldn't use it. Um, I'm sure we've all ran into that, you know, we're just like, why is this thing not loading? So yeah, basically we want this function just to avoid that. Super important. And so these over here are optional. And I guess they're like Apple has provided us with like, you know, like little comments about what each of these does. So for example, if you want to like edit like the cells in your table, like remove cells, for example, etc. Like maybe like if you're in like your contacts or like your Spotify playlist, right? So Spotify also uses like a table view, right? You want to like remove like songs from your playlist, then you know you would uncomment this function, do that. Um, Same over here, support editing. Or also like maybe like you're on your Spotify like queue, right? And you want to like, you know, move like one song up next to play next or whatever. Then that's also that's what this function does. It allows you to like drag and drop like arrange cells differently essentially. And this function is like navigation, which basically means in order to like go from one view controller to the next, you want a thing called a segue, which is like, and you want to tie that to like a button or something. But we don't need to deal with that because we are, or sorry, no, sorry, I think we do need to deal with that. Because sorry, but our navigation controller helps us with like navigation. Right. So if like for example, if this we didn't have a navigation controller, like if we were to like click a cell and we want to go to like another page displaying more info about the cell, right? Like it would be very hard for us to go back or to remember essentially where we were before, which was like the main table view. But with a navigation controller, you can remember where you were before, which is why like you know, like in Spotify, or, you know, if you're just like scrolling through, like exploring new artists and albums, whatever, if you like click the back button on the top left, you can go back to like where you originally were. Okay, so I see a couple questions. Yeah, so Jeremiah asked, would it stop loading cells once you pass them? Yeah, so yeah, it's basically that. It'll only load what's on the page, and so once you like scroll past it, it'll just not reload those. So it'll only load like 20 or so cells at a time, depending on the size of your cells. Okay. All right. Does anyone have any questions about how the table view works or anything? All right. So, cool. Let's start making some custom cells. All right. So first thing I hope you guys noticed was on this file selector on the left, I added a new file, a movie view cell. So if everyone clicks on that, you should see like a blank template for a UI table view cell. And so in order to save everyone time, I just like made it myself. But like if you were wanted to like make one like by yourself, all you need to do is like do what we did earlier. So you would just go file, new file. You can make it a Swift file, you can make it a Cocoa Touch class, doesn't really matter. But then you just like select table view cell and then you create your UI table view cell. So yeah, so just a reminder for how to do that if when you're doing it in your own project. And so, right, so another thing we want to do is, right, so another thing, sorry, is let's think about like what we would like to display if we want to display like, I guess like an app that displays like movies and stuff. Like what would you want to see in like each cell? Just like, I don't know, type your thoughts into the chat. There's like no wrong answers here, really. Like what sort of things would you want to see like on an app that just displays like movies? Title, thumbnail, yep, director, GIFs maybe, link of the movie, release date, yep. Yep, all those things, right? So basically you just want to display like a bunch of information, ratings too, that could be good. And right, which means you probably want like a custom view cell, right? Like you probably don't just like want, if you go back here, like a cell with a single line of text, right? You want to be able to like put an image in there or like a couple lines of text, for example. So okay, whether or not many long as matches. All right, I don't know about that one. But yeah, so right. So in order to do that, we create like a custom UI view cell. And so let's like, I guess the most important thing, right, is of course a title. So we'll say like let title label be a UI label. Let's do like the easiest syntax we can. And let's say we want to know like maybe like a brief synopsis, right? So let's say synopsis equals UI label. And that like rating maybe equals another UI label. And the same with a I don't know, release date. Let's say we care about those ones. Okay. So all right. So first, after we define that, let's take a look at the rest of the code in here. So all right. So the first method essentially is like, as you can see, it's like a constructor, and it'll just like essentially say like, I don't know, like the basic style of the cell. Pretty default, right? Just whatever the style of like the current page is. We'll make the background color whatever the system background is. So if your phone is in dark mode, it'll be in like dark mode. If it's like in light mode, background will be in light mode. It's pretty easy. And then here is like another constructor that is essentially like a protocol, which means like if you adhere to a protocol like defines like certain like variables or methods that anything that adheres to it must also have those like methods or variables. And so this is just like an NS coder protocol, which means I think like essentially like all, I think Jack can correct me if I'm wrong, but like I think like basically all like UI classes like subscribe to like NS coder in some form. And so like a lot of them have this as, I don't know, just like default like implemented, but I think for like table view cells among others, like you need to like, since it's custom, you want to like explicitly say that. But I mean, other than that, yeah, I think it's got something to do with like a storyboard. So you'll find this in like storyboard based iOS apps. But yeah, basically these are just going to be here. We're not really going to touch it too much. Um, but right. So now we want to essentially like, you know, actually like display these four things inside the cell. So does anyone remember like what we need to do in order to display like UI elements on a UI view? Like maybe like a specific method. Sorry, the sun is in my eyes. Like you can type it out in the chat, or you can just like unmute yourself. All right, refresher. So in order to actually display, you know, like the labels or whatever you define. Oh, wait, someone said something. Yep. All right. Yeah. So you so got it right. You need to add a subview to the view. And since a UI table view cell isn't exactly a view controller, we don't have a function like view did load, where that's called each time view is loaded. So we're gonna like write our own function, but we're not gonna call it view did load because that's confusing. So we're gonna call it like maybe like setup views. Inside setup views, the first thing we do is we say view dot add subview title label, for example. View dot add subview synopsis. Add subview rating. Okay. And so now we should be able to see oops, I think it's stuffed up. Because oh, okay. So mistake. I think since UI table view cell is a subclass, or it's like already a UI view, it's a subclass of UI view. All you need to do is just do add subview instead of self-view. Okay, and so that'll add everything. And so now, right. So now, technically, right, like we believe that we can essentially once we run this right inside the movie table view controller, if we like register movie view cell, we'll be able to see like, I don't know, like a basic title label and synopsis and a rating and a release date. So in order to do that, in order to like tell, right, let's make everything a different color first, right? And so this is like another like iOS dev trick, I guess, when you're first making an app, is like, you know, your elements might run onto each other. You don't want any overlap, for example. And so before you like actually like, you know, add data and things, what you want to do to make sure everything's laid out correctly on the screen is you can change the background color to like really ridiculous, like ugly things just to make sure, you know, like, okay, that's where I want it to be. All that. So I don't know, it's like blue maybe, and then release date dot background. Oops. Let's make that with yellow. All right. And all right, so now we want to display the movie view cell, right? To like make sure that we can see each of the UI, like the UI labels in it. Does anyone, based on like, I guess like this, just based on this code, which I like sort of went over in session 2, like how I will be able to like display like a certain cell type. Like first of all, which function would I be looking at? Would I be looking at number of sections, rows in section, or like the DQ views per se? Like which function will allow me to display a movie view cell? Anyone? Joseph says the third. Yinso says second. Let's see. All right, so I'm just gonna go over the answer. But yeah, so it's gonna be the third one. So the second one is, I can see where that's going because like, I mean, the second one tells you exactly how many cells you will be displaying, but the third one, like the decreasable cell, will tell you like exactly which cells you are displaying, right? Like what type of cell you're displaying. Are you displaying like a title cell, right? Like on the news app, or are you displaying like one of those half row cells, or like a full row cell, or something like that, right? And so, yeah, so we would be in this third function here. And so specifically, we're going to be looking at line 38. We're going to be editing that, right? Because if you look at this line, inside the table view, you're saying here reusable cell with identifier, right? And then you have like a specific identifier. And so what that means is that essentially like each UI table cell that you have like is going to like need like a unique identifier so that like when this function is like loading cells to like display, like it knows like which cell to load, right? So yeah, they use like a cell identifier basically to do that. And so well, we could say like, like movie, like movie cell. And well, if we were to do this, right, and we try to, let's say, run the preview again, we get an error, preview crashed. And actually, like, I ran into this last workshop, and does anyone remember why this error happened?
Is it because of the self table view register and like in the
Right.
beginning?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Because we did not tell this table view to like say like, hey, acknowledge that like this specific cell with like this cell identifier exists. And so, right, so essentially in view did load, you will need to register like all the cells that you are going to be using, right? And so like if you're using like 5 different types of cells, you're gonna have to call this like 5 different times with the type of cell that you want to register. All right, so here in the first parameter, you want to register like the cell class, like literally. So we made a movie view cell, right? Class movie view cell. So we're just gonna say movie view cell dot self. Remember, you need like the dot self at the end, too, but that's like a common bug as well. And then for cell reuse identifier is like the specific identifier that you want. So here would be movie cell. And so now, it just didn't crash anymore. So that's awesome. So one thing to note is like for good coding practice, you want like as little like I don't know, like floating strings there are as possible. So if it's like repeated like in multiple places, you might as well just make a variable, right? It also makes it easier to read and easier to like track down bugs later. So this is just like a style thing. So what we can do here, if you go back to movie view cell, as you see in like line 12, I made to do right, so let's make a static variable. So static means you can essentially like call it from like any like outside this file. And so what you can say is like static let movie cell ID equals movie view cell. And so back in movie table view controller now, you can just say movie view cell dot movie cell ID. And then same thing down below. Instead of having this floating string, you can just use movie view cell dot movie cell ID. And now, well, technically, we should be able to hopefully see the subviews we added to the movie view cell. But we do not see the subviews that we added. Does anyone have any clue why we do not see all these beautifully colored labels that should be there. Okay. It's totally fine because I think I sort of glossed over this. Right. Okay, so Joseph says because we never signed it to a box. And yeah, that's basically it. Because let's see. Well, actually, a couple of reasons. So actually, like it's because well, one thing is I never called the function setup views. So if we call, let's say, cell. Okay, let's comment out this. Let's say cell dot set up. Oops. Um, so first, another thing we need to do is we need to like cast this type of cell into a movie view cell, I believe, and then so now we can say cell dot setup views, right? Because now it is a movie view cell, so we can now call cell dot setup views. But you know, still we see that nothing is set up here. And well, one way we can like take a look at this is we can say, okay, after we call setup views, we can oh, this is a great time to go over debugging. You can just like print, right? Like cell dot I don't know, let's say like the title label. And then well, in order to like debug, you gotta like actually run this. So command R. And here, it's gonna take a little second. But like there's going to be a debug console that's going to come up from the bottom of the page. Well, and that'll like help you like figure out what's going on. Right, so you can see here, something is okay. Well, one thing I forgot to do when I made the starter code was to use the root view controller of let's say so we can make this like movie AC. So once you do that, right, now you see a table cell or table view, sorry. And then you see like all this stuff on the bottom. And then like Joseph said, if you look here, right, you're printing a label, but the frame is 0000. So really quickly how in iOS people like they define frames is the first two are like the X and Y coordinates of like the top left corner of the rectangle, and then the next two are like the height and the width. So I mean, it's telling me that the height and the width are 0. And that sounds about right because I do not think we have configured the frame of essentially each of these labels. So does anyone remember how we do that? How do we give like a size to these things? All right, for the sake of time, so one thing we could do is we could go dot frame dot you know like and like set essentially the size of the frame to like exactly like let's say you know like something like, so this isn't correct but syntactically, but you could like literally set it to um a like a specific rectangle, like I wanted to start at like 50 or maybe like 10 from the top, and then make it like 100 for width, um maybe like actually for height we'll make it 100, but we'll make the width larger. And we could do that. Does anyone see like an issue with this? Maybe I also briefly went over this last session. what's an issue with yeah, Joseph?
Is it because your width and height is like exceeds your coordinates? Like if you are at 50, 10, but your width is like 200, that would be like 50 units like cropped out. Not entirely.
Right, yeah, that's one issue. And someone else has brought up that like it can show up differently on different interfaces. And yeah, that's also true, right? Like let's say like right, like okay, so let's say I start at 50, right? And then my width is 200, so that means I end at like 250, right? Let's say like what if my screen isn't that big, right? Like what if I'm on like an iPod touch like 7, right? And my screen is like at 200, then you know it's cut off, like what Joseph was saying. And also just yeah, you know, like maybe like at 50, that's like you're already starting at like, you know, the middle of the screen on like an iPod, right? But like on an iPhone, you're like starting at like pretty close to the left side of the screen. So right, yeah, it's basically for different devices, it'll like show up differently. And like we don't want that, or like I mean any like developer doesn't want that. That doesn't look good. So instead, is what people earlier in the chat were suggesting is we use instead anchors. Um, and yeah, so instead we want to like anchor the title to a certain place. And all right, so let's do that really quickly. So we want to activate NSA constraints, and we want like a whole array of constraints. So maybe let's say, you know, you want your title to be up there first. And so we're gonna like update, or we're gonna have the leading anchor anchored to let's say like the leading meaning the left side of the screen. Let's say we're gonna anchor it to like basically the left side of the screen, but with a constant offset of like 10, right? Otherwise that it'll like literally start at the edge of the screen, which is doesn't look great. And then let's say our trailing anchor, we want the title to take up, all the way up to like we want the title to take up like the entire like width of like the screen. So then we would set this also to be the cells essentially trailing anchor, and then with this time with a -10 because it's offset to the right. And then let's say we want, oops, I'm just gonna call this a title rather than a title label just to make this easy. And let's say the top anchor, we also want that to be the self dot top anchor, maybe like only 5 off from the top part of the screen. And let's say we want bottom anchor to be equal to like the bottom of the screen as well. -5, but we also want the height to be a certain value, like 100. First of all right, there's like 2 errors here. So does anyone want to like go over, I don't know, give me like one error.
You can't set like all 3 of top anchor, bottom anchor, and height.
Yep. Exactly. So if you set like the top anchor, you can like set either the bottom or the height, because otherwise you're telling like the compiler that, well, I want it to go all the way to the bottom, but also I want it to be of height 100. And so it's like given like 2, you know, like conflicting instructions. So that's not gonna work. I mean the same thing, like you can yeah, usually you define the top and the height, right? Because like how the axis works is like 0 is the top, and so the height is like down, positive. So I've never seen like, yeah, I guess you could define bottom and height, and this might be like negative, but I've never seen that before. So yeah. So I guess we can delete bottom here if we want like the height to be fixed to be 100. And I claim that even after I do that, nothing's gonna show up. And in fact, this app isn't gonna run. Why is that? This is like a more subtle thing. And I think I probably glossed over this in the workshop too. But basically, in order to like get these constraints to like actually work, you have to tell like the compiler to like ignore the default constraints. And how that works is you just say title dot translates auto resizing mask into constraints. So you want to set that to be false. And so that essentially allows you to like customize like which constraints you're going to set. And so therefore these constraints will actually be activated. All right. So now let's go back to movie table view controller. And let's resume the preview. Oh, oops. Yeah, we deleted the title. So that's not it. Great. So now we have a huge cell. And well, okay, so oh wow, okay, so this is interesting. Didn't expect for this to happen, but you can still see like the line separating like the 10 cells, but I think it's the title cell is like overrunning essentially across each of the cells, which is why it looks like a huge red block, which is not what we want. But that's fine because we were gonna, edit the constraints to begin with anyways. All right, so let's go back to the movie view cell. And I think a couple of you guys said inside the cell we want another thing that would be good is like the poster image. So let's do that. And so we're gonna add a UI image view as well. And let's think about how we want to configure this. So first, let's not forget to add a poster. All right, and let's make like poster dot background be like I don't know. All right. So I guess like because I'm not really creative, or just like I guess app developers in general aren't really creative, or because UI UX has already like established this almost as a theorem. But we usually like images to like take up the entire like top bottom of the cell. And so let's put this image to the left of the cell and take up like the top, like essentially the entire height of the cell. So let's do that. So let's say poster dot translates equals false. And let's auto layout it. All right, someone want to just like tell me what constraints I should be doing. If I want it to be to like the left half of the cell, but also take up like essentially the entire height. Just like I don't know, just put out like a constraint, just like unmute yourself. What constraints would I be looking at? Okay, leading anchor set to 0. Okay. Right. So yeah, we're gonna want to anchor it to the left of the cell. So let's do that. And I'm gonna change the leading anchor set. Or actually, we'll leave the leading anchor set to 0. And we'll see what that looks like. So dot constraint equal to self dot leading anchor. All right. Other constraints. Okay, so Lexi says top anchor. Okay. Right. So I think you're saying you want to anchor the top anchor to the top anchor, which is right. Usually you wouldn't want to like anchor a leading anchor to the top anchor because that's like saying yeah, yeah, uh-huh. Right. Usually you want to align like, you know, the length or sorry, the height and the width to each other. So yeah, we can do that. So equal to self dot top anchor. Other constraints. Well, I guess for the sake of time, right. So if I wanted to the left side of the screen, I guess like one thing I could do is I could like anchor it to like the center X anchor, I think. But like usually across different devices, I would want this, right, this image to like have the same width. So instead, I will just disregard the trailing anchor and instead use the width anchor. And we'll say that's equal to a constant of like 150, I think would be good. All right. And then like if I want to take up the entire height of the cell, right? Then I would rather just anchor it to the bottom of the cell because I don't really know how big this cell is going to be yet. And so instead of using height anchor, we will do equal to self dot bottom anchor. All right, and that should be good. All right, let's see what this looks like. All right, so now we got this this sort of blob. And so I guess like the first thing we notice is like how like leading anchor wise, right? Like you're literally starting the image on the edge of the screen. And once again, if you look at like I said, the news app is my go-to demo, but if you look at the news app on your phone, like the images do not start at the edge of the screen, right? Or else it just looks like the image runs over. And so that's why instead of doing equal to leading anchor, you also want like a constant offset. And like usually I just go with like 10. So we'll do that. Same with top anchor. And bottom anchor would then just be like 10. So now let's take a look. Okay, well now the whole title thing is obscuring our okay, something oops, wrong canvas. So right. So all right, so now the title is obscuring our poster. We can't see the purple anymore. Let's say, all right, so we have the poster take up the entire left side of the cell. Anyone have an idea of how to not let that happen? Like how do we like have the title start after the poster ends? Right. So two answers, make separate layers. Okay. Anchor the title to the end of the poster. Assign leading anchor to poster's trailing anchor. Yes, exactly. Yeah, so that's when you guys like are getting the hang of this, right? So yeah, we wanted to start where the poster ends, so we will essentially set the title's leading anchor to poster's trailing anchor. So let's do that. Poster dot trailing anchor. And like maybe we'll leave like a space of like 5 between these two, just to give us some more width. Yeah, let's still keep the height as 100. Now let's take a look. Right, nice. So now we see like the titles are being, like you can sort of see a purple line where the image is. And so let's like fix this blob because it looks really bad right now. Like I can't even tell like what is a cell. So I guess here is like another useful method you can override in your table view. So you can do, I think it's like height. Yes, height for row at. And so here you can define how like high you want each of your cells to be. I guess since we're using like the same types of cells, we can say like, let's make it like return 200. And then let's adjust this. Nice. So now that looks more like a cell that we would like to see. That definitely looks like 10 cells, right? We got poster on the left, title on the right. Cool. And let's see. Oops, wrong controller. All right, so we got the title, we got the poster. Maybe we want the. Okay, I'm just trying to think. I don't know. Maybe we want like the rating and like the synopsis. First of all, I'm gonna make the title a little bit like shorter so we get some more room for the other two. You'll like make it like a 60. All right, so now we want to configure like the rating. It's false and the synopsis. It's false. Okay. All right, Jack. That can be up to them to make, like in like their actual project. But all right, so let's say like I want like the rating to take up, I guess like the bottom half, but like let's say I want like the rating to like be like here and like the synopsis to be like this chunk. Right. So then like a little more help from you guys then. What would that look like with constraint wise? Where would the where would they be anchored? Oh, I guess another cool thing is in Xcode, if you hold down Option and you take your cursor, you can like, you see this question mark? You can like essentially highlight across an entire like couple lines, right? And so that just makes like a huge cursor. Like if I just delete this, now I can write like title across like 4 lines at once. It's pretty cool. But yeah, anyways, straying from that. Let's see what you guys have to say. Synopsis leading anchor set to post, trailing is offset 10, top is set to title, bottom is offset 10, and leading is the trailing of the purple wall. Yeah, yep. Those all sound good to me. All right, so then rating dot okay. Yeah, so yeah, maybe I'll put like the synopsis first. The synopsis to the left. So yeah, so maybe we'll say like synopsis dot leading anchor dot constraint equal to booster dot and length to the 5 and well, for the sake of time, we'll just do yes. So let's say we want the width to be like predefined in this case, because we don't want it to be taking up the entire page or the entire cell. So dot constraint equal to constant. I don't know, we want the synopsis to be like wider. So we'll say like maybe like 100. I don't know what that's going to look like, but we'll just put it as that for now. And then we'll say the bottom anchor will be, here's a good example of when like you would want to use like top and bottom rather than like top and height, right? Because like, I guess like the title already defines the height. So then here all we need to do is say top anchor dot constrained to title dot bottom, and I'm gonna make that an offset of like 5. Bottom anchor equals self dot bottom anchor constant of just to make it symmetric, and then oops, comma. I'm just gonna copy and paste this here. And then, okay, here's a part that's cool where you hold down Option, take your cursor, drag over all this, and then you get like this gigantic cursor, and then boom, wow, so much power in Xcode. Okay, that's probably like one of the only things on Xcode that I like. But all right, so leading anchor, we want it to be after the synopsis. And well, we don't want the width because what if it runs off the page? So instead we're gonna make a trailing anchor here, and we're gonna constrain that to the self dot trailing anchor constant -5. Top anchor, title, bottom anchor, and then yeah, bottom anchor is just like the page. Let me just clear this here. Now let's take a look at what our cells look like. Okay, awesome, nice. So if you want the, let's see, what do we want? What is blue and what is green? Okay, so blue is the rating. So blue is looking a little chunky. Like rating does not need that big of a thing, you know. So here's where you just like edit this maybe and like make this like 100 or 60. Synopsis larger. You know, and then you just like, I don't know, so we just play with values like that. Just like make sure everything's resizing to what you want it to be. So, nice. Okay, that looks better. Cool. All right. So one thing that's like making me OCD a little is like you can see how like the title and like the rating are not aligned at their trailing anchors. So I think I left the title as -10 for the trailing anchor, so which means I should probably edit the rating as well, make this -10. But okay, nice. So now we have a home view cell with everything laid out properly. So is everyone comfortable with using like NS layout constraints? Everyone understand? Okay, awesome. Nice. So then honestly, like this is gonna be really useful. I'd say probably like the most useful thing you're gonna be building in the hackathon. Just because like I don't know, like front end is usually, you know, like what people like making apps for. And so this is like pretty important. So it's really good that you guys understand what's going on. So now let's give some more functionality. Let's load these images in. Okay, so I guess like one thing just mix this up. Is let's say we want images for like the actual poster. So what we can do is we can say poster dot image equals image named late sunset 1 or something, just to like go over again how the UI image works, and do that. Nice. So now you got that, and so the next step is essentially loading in data. right, into each of these and like also making different data, right, because you want like 10 of the same piece showing up. So we're going to be doing that next. And so first, let's set the backbone of what a movie should contain. And so here is where I like to use structs, mostly because I'm not really editing the data like outside of like, you know, like other outside of like loading the data. I'm not really editing it basically. Like once it's loaded, I'm not like changing like what the title of the movie is. So what I like to do is you can like put the struct, it doesn't really matter where you put the struct. You can like make a separate file for all your structs too. So I'm just going to define a struct movie at the top of movie table view controller. And we're going to say, you know, it's going to have a title. It's going to have a rating. It's going to have, sorry, title, rating, and synopsis. And those you want to define as type string. And then let's say maybe like you want to say like, you know, what languages is this movie like, you know, like being like recorded in or whatever is available, or the category the movie belongs to. And so we're gonna be looking more into filtering later. I don't know if we're gonna be able to get to this here, but if you don't like, even if you don't show it on here, for example, like if you were to like press the cell and you want to like display more info, you could like perhaps like display that, right? So we can say like so we can like still like define like this is part of the struct movie, if that makes sense. Did I get my syntax wrong? Yes. Okay. I'm not supposed to. Okay. Cool. All right. So, give me a sec. I did not expect to get through this much. So, I guess like to preview or like set up what we're going to be doing next, is if you checked out 3 movie data / starter and you go to your Finder. So once again, bring up Finder. You will see I uploaded a JSON file here, movies.json. So if we want to open that, yeah, sure, I'll just open an Atom. So this is how, like initially, at least for now, we're going to be reading data in. You know, like usually, for example, you could read data in from like a backend API, which I don't know if you guys have used before. But I think like in web dev beginner and maybe in web dev advanced, like they go over like how to like get data from APIs. Basically, this is like data I just like got from like the movie database API. I think I just got all the movies from page 1 or something. But so the data is outputted in like this JSON format. So has anyone like seen JSON before or worked with JSON? Oh wait, am I going overtime? Oh my god, I went overtime. Okay. All right. So I just realized that this thing was supposed to end at 4:40, not at 5. Because the next session starts at 5. But so feel free to just like log off right now, like take a break. And we will be starting back in like 10 minutes or so. Yeah, so we're just gonna be going over starting off on like how JSON works and how to like load this data into that. So yeah. And usually I would like I'll take like well, I'll stay over and take like a little bit of questions for like maybe like 5 minutes, so until like 4:53 p.m. Eastern, because I still need to prep for the last workshop. So if you guys have like quick questions, stay on afterwards, and I'll try to answer them. Otherwise, I'll see you guys in like 10 minutes. Yeah, Joseph.
Wait, so is a JSON file kind of just like a like a special text file for like app development?
Yeah, you can think of it like that. It's more like a way to, so it stands for, was it JavaScript object notation? And yeah, it's basically like a easy way to like display data, like format data in a way that's like readable across like many different platforms. So not just like app dev, for example. But yeah, so like I mean it's used like in web dev, in app dev. It's just like a fast way to like get data.
Okay, so there's no like functions, like built-in functions for itself. It's just like
Yeah, yeah. It's just like a way to display the data formatted.
Right. Oh, and also can you like git push the find recommend, so like if we want to go over it later or something?
Yeah. I will do that in like the 10 minutes I have. All right, let me stop.
All right, I gotta head out.